My name is Javier Garcia, and I grew up in a small village in Puerto Rico. As a child, I often heard stories of a creature known as the chupacabra beast said to prey on livestock, draining their blood and leaving behind lifeless bodies. The tales were frightening, but like most children, I dismissed them as mere folklore. Little did I know that one day, I would come face to face with this terrifying creature. In the summer of 2023, I returned to my village after years of living in the United States. I had built a life for myself as a veterinarian, but I felt a longing to reconnect with my roots. My family owned a small farm, and I decided to spend some time helping out and enjoying the tranquility of rural life. The first few weeks were peaceful. I tended to the animals, helped with the crops, and reconnected with old friends. However, things took a dark turn one night when I was awakened by the sound of distressed animals. I grabbed my flashlight and rushed outside, my heart pounding with fear. What I saw chilled me to the bone. Several of our goats lay dead, their bodies strangely unmarked, except for 2 small puncture wounds on their necks. It was as if something had drained them of their blood. The sight was eerily reminiscent of the chupacabra stories I had heard as a child. The next morning, I held a meeting with my family and our neighbors. We gathered in the village square, where the elders recounted their own encounters with the chupacabra. Some spoke of livestock lost, others of eerie sightings at night. The fear in their voices was palpable. One of the villagers, Maria, claimed to have seen the creature. "It was late at night," she said, her voice trembling. "I heard something outside and looked out the window. There it was, a dark figure, hunched over one of my chickens. It had glowing red eyes and spines down its back. I was too scared to move." Her description matched the traditional accounts of the chupacabra, an eerie, reptilian creature with spines along its back and glowing red eyes. Despite my scientific training, I didn't help but feel a growing sense of dread. There was something out there, something that defied explanation. Determined to get to the bottom of the mystery, I decided to investigate further. I set up motion-activated cameras around the farm and began staying up late, watching for any signs of the creature. The nights were long and tense, with every rustle of leaves and distant howl setting my nerves on edge. On the 4th night, my patience paid off. I was reviewing the footage from one of the cameras when I saw a shadowy figure moving through the trees. It was hunched and moved with an unnatural gait. As it approached the goat pen, I could see its glowing red eyes and the spines along its back. I felt a chill run down my spine. I knew I needed more evidence. I called my friend Carlos, a wildlife biologist, and asked for his help. Carlos was skeptical, but agreed to join me in the investigation. Together, we set up additional cameras and motion sensors around the farm. The following night, we stayed up late, watching the live feed from the cameras. Around midnight, we saw the creature again. It moved silently through the shadows, its eyes glowing with an eerie light. As it approached the goats, Carlos and I rushed outside, hoping to catch it in the act. We were too late. By the time we reached the pen, the creature had disappeared, leaving behind another dead goat with the same puncture wounds. Carlos examined the body, his face grim. "Whatever this thing is, it's not natural," he said. "We need to be careful." The next day, we reviewed the footage and showed it to the villagers. The sight of the chupacabra on camera sent waves of fear through the community. People began to fortify their homes and keep their livestock close. Despite the heightened precautions, the attacks continued, each one more brazen than the last. Desperate for answers, I reached out to Dr. Elena Morales, a cryptozoologist who had studied the chupacabra extensively. Dr. Morales agreed to come to the village and help us with our investigation. She arrived a few days later, bringing with her a wealth of knowledge and specialized equipment. Dr. Morales set up a series of traps and sensors around the farm, hoping to capture the creature. We worked tirelessly, analyzing the evidence and trying to predict the chupacabra's next move. As the days passed, the tension in the village grew. People were afraid to go out at night, and the sense of dread was palpable. One night, as we were monitoring the traps, we heard a series of loud noises coming from the barn. We grabbed our flashlights and rushed over, our hearts pounding with fear and anticipation. As we approached, we saw the chupacabra trapped inside one of the cages. The creature was even more terrifying up close. Its eyes glowed with a malevolent light, and its spines bristled as it snarled and thrashed against the cage. Despite its fearsome appearance, I felt a pang of sympathy for the beast. It was a creature of the wild, driven by instinct and hunger. Dr. Morales carefully tranquilized the chupacabra, and we transported it to a secure location for further study. Over the next few days, we conducted a series of tests and examinations. The creature's biology was unlike anything we had ever seen, a bizarre mix of reptilian and mammalian traits. As we studied the chupacabra, we began to piece together its behavior and habits. It was a solitary predator, highly adaptable and intelligent. Its ability to drain blood suggested a specialized feeding mechanism, possibly related to parasitic insects. Despite our findings, many questions remained unanswered. The capture of the chupacabra brought a sense of relief to the village, but the fear and tension lingered. People were wary, unsure if there were more creatures out there. The experience had shaken their sense of security and reminded them of the mysteries and dangers that still lurk in the world. For me, the encounter with the chupacabra was both terrifying and enlightening. It challenged my scientific understanding and forced me to confront the unknown. As a veterinarian and researcher, I'm committed to continuing my study of the creature, hoping to unlock its secrets and learn more about its place in the natural world. The chupacabra remains a symbol of the unexplained, a reminder that there are still many mysteries waiting to be uncovered. As I continue my work, I carry with me the lessons of that summer: courage, curiosity, and a deep respect for the unknown. My name is Kevin Mitchell, and I've always been a skeptic. As a journalist for a major magazine, my job is to separate fact from fiction, to uncover the truth behind the stories that captivate the public's imagination. When I first heard about the Jersey Devil, I dismissed it as just another piece of American folklore, tale spun to scare children and entertain adults. But a recent series of strange events in the Pine Barrens of New Jersey made me question everything I thought I knew. It all started with a phone call from an old friend, Sarah. We had grown up together in the small town of Hamilton, on the edge of the Pine Barrens, but had lost touch over the years. Sarah now worked as a park ranger, and her voice on the other end of the line was filled with fear. "Kevin, I need your help," she said, her voice trembling. "There's something out here in the woods. People are disappearing, and I think it might be the Jersey Devil." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. "Sarah, you know I don't believe in that stuff. It's just a legend." I know, she replied. "But I can't explain what's happening. You need to see it for yourself." Despite my skepticism, I decided to take a leave of absence and head back to Hamilton. If nothing else, it would make for an interesting story. I packed my bags, grabbed my camera and recorder, and made the drive to New Jersey. When I arrived, Sarah was waiting for me at the ranger station. She looked tired and worried, a stark contrast to the confident and adventurous girl I remembered. She took me to a small cabin in the woods where I would be staying during my investigation. "Be careful, Kevin," she warned, as she handed me a map of the area. "There have been strange sightings and unexplained noises at night. And whatever you do, don't wander too far from the cabin after dark." I nodded, though I still wasn't convinced. I spent the first day exploring the Pine Barrens, interviewing locals and gathering stories. The tales were all eerily similar: strange screeches in the night, shadowy figures lurking in the trees, and livestock found dead with no apparent cause. That evening, I sat on the porch of the cabin, reviewing my notes and enjoying the cool breeze. As the sun set, the forest around me grew dark and silent. I couldn't shake the feeling of being watched, and a sense of unease settled over me. Suddenly, a piercing screech echoed through the trees. I froze, my heart pounding in my chest. The sound was unlike anything I had ever heard, a mix of a woman's scream and an animal's howl. I grabbed my flashlight and camera and cautiously made my way into the woods, following the sound. As I moved deeper into the forest, the trees closed in around me, their twisted branches casting eerie shadows in the dim light. I heard rustling in the underbrush and the faint sound of footsteps. My flashlight flickered, and I cursed under my breath. Then I saw a dark figure darting between the trees. It was fast, almost too fast to be human. I raised my camera and snapped a few photos, hoping to capture whatever it was. The figure stopped and turned to face me, its eyes glowing red in the darkness. My breath caught in my throat as I realized I was looking at the Jersey Devil. The creature was grotesque, with leathery wings, a horse-like head, and clawed hands. It let out another screech and took a step toward me. I stumbled backward, my flashlight slipping from my grasp. In the dim light, I could see its sharp teeth and the malevolent glint in its eyes. I turned and ran, my heart pounding in my ears. The forest seemed to close in around me, the trees and underbrush creating an impenetrable maze. I could hear the creature behind me, its footsteps growing closer. Desperation fueled my legs as I sprinted toward the cabin, the screeches of the Jersey Devil echoing in the night. I burst through the door and slammed it shut, my chest heaving with exertion. I fumbled for the lock, my hands shaking. The creature's screeches grew louder, and I could hear it scratching at the door. I grabbed a chair and wedged it under the handle, hoping it would hold. The noise outside subsided, and an eerie silence fell over the cabin. I sank to the floor, my mind racing. I had come face to face with the Jersey Devil, and it had nearly killed me. The stories were true, and I had the photos to prove it. The next morning, I showed Sarah the photos and recounted my encounter. Her face went pale as she listened, and she nodded grimly. "We need to warn the others," she said. "If the Jersey Devil is real, then everyone in the Pine Barrens is in danger." We spent the next few days organizing a search party, enlisting the help of local authorities and volunteers. We set up cameras and traps throughout the forest, hoping to capture more evidence and find a way to protect the community. One night, as we were reviewing the footage, we saw the Jersey Devil again. It moved through the trees with an otherworldly grace, its wings casting dark shadows. It seemed to be searching for something, and we realized that it was hunting. The search party intensified their efforts, patrolling the woods and keeping a close watch on the livestock. Despite our precautions, more animals were found dead, their bodies mutilated and drained of blood. The fear in the community grew, and people began to avoid the forest altogether. One evening, as we were setting up another round of traps, we heard a scream. We rushed toward the sound, our flashlights cutting through the darkness. We found one of the volunteers, a young man named Mark, lying on the ground, his leg bleeding profusely. He was pale and trembling, and he whispered, "It got me. The devil got me." We carried Mark back to the cabin and tended to his wounds. He had deep gashes on his leg, and he was in shock. As we bandaged him up, he recounted his encounter with the creature. "It came out of nowhere," he said, his voice weak. "I tried to run, but it was too fast. It slashed at me with its claws and disappeared into the trees." The attack on Mark was a turning point. We realized that the Jersey Devil was not just a threat to livestock, but to people as well. We needed to find a way to stop it before more lives were put in danger. We decided to confront the creature head-on. Armed with tranquilizer guns and protective gear, we ventured into the heart of the Pine Barrens, following the trails and signs left by the Jersey Devil. The forest was eerily silent, and every rustle of leaves sent a chill down my spine. As we moved deeper into the woods, we found an old, abandoned cabin. It was overgrown with vines and covered in moss, but it looked like it had been recently disturbed. We approached cautiously, our weapons at the ready. Inside the cabin, we found a makeshift nest. The walls were lined with bones and feathers, and the air was thick with the smell of decay. In the center of the room, lying on a bed of leaves, was the Jersey Devil. It was sleeping, its chest rising and falling with each breath. We aimed our tranquilizer guns and fired. The creature let out a screech and thrashed wildly, but the tranquilizers took effect, and it soon fell into a deep sleep. We carefully secured it and transported it back to the ranger station. The capture of the Jersey Devil was a moment of triumph, but it also raised many questions. What was this creature? Where did it come from? And how had it survived for so long undetected? Over the next few weeks, we conducted a series of tests and examinations. The Jersey Devil's biology was unlike anything we had ever seen, a bizarre mix of mammalian and reptilian traits. It had an unusually high level of intelligence and a complex social structure. As we studied the creature, we began to piece together its history. The Jersey Devil was not just a legend, but a real, living entity that had adapted to its environment over centuries. Its attacks on livestock and people were driven by a need for survival, a predator trying to protect its territory. The discovery of the Jersey Devil sent shockwaves through the scientific community and the public. It challenged our understanding of the natural world and forced us to confront the mysteries that still exist in the shadows. For me, the encounter was a humbling reminder of the unknown and the importance of keeping an open mind. As I returned to my life as a journalist, I carried with me the lessons of that summer. The Jersey Devil was no longer just a story, but a symbol of the unexplained. A reminder that there are still many wonders and terrors waiting to be discovered. My name is Eileen MacLeod, and I grew up in the quaint village of Drumnadrochit, on the shores of Loch Ness, Scotland. The legend of the Loch Ness Monster, or Nessie, as we affectionately call her, has been a part of my life for as long as I can remember. My parents owned a small bed and breakfast, and our guests were often tourists hoping to catch a glimpse of the elusive creature. As a child, I would sit by the loch, staring out over the water, imagining what secrets lay beneath its dark surface. I moved to Edinburgh for university and eventually became a marine biologist. My work took me to exotic locations around the world, but my heart always longed for the misty hills and deep waters of Loch Ness. In the summer of 2022, I decided to take a sabbatical and return to my roots. Hoping to combine my scientific knowledge with my childhood curiosity to investigate the mystery of Nessie. Upon arriving in Drumnadrochit, I was greeted by familiar faces and nostalgic sights. The village hadn't changed much, and the loch was as beautiful and enigmatic as ever. I set up my base of operations at my parents' bed and breakfast, and began to plan my research. I reached out to old friends and local experts, gathering stories and data about Nessie sightings. One evening, while having dinner at the local pub, I struck up a conversation with an old fisherman named Angus. He was a weathered man, with deep-set eyes that seemed to hold a lifetime of secrets. When I mentioned my interest in the Loch Ness Monster, he leaned in and whispered, "If you want to find Nessie, you'll need to go deeper than anyone has ever gone before." Intrigued, I pressed him for more information. Angus told me about a series of underwater caves he had discovered years ago while fishing. "The caves are dangerous," he warned. "But if Nessie is real, that's where you'll find her." With Angus' guidance, I rented a small boat and gathered my diving equipment. I enlisted the help of my old friend, Ewan, who was an experienced diver. Together, we planned our expedition to explore the depths of Loch Ness and the hidden caves beneath its surface. The first few days of diving were uneventful. We mapped the underwater terrain and collected samples, but there was no sign of Nessie. On the fourth day, as we descended into a particularly deep part of the loch, we stumbled upon an entrance to one of the caves Angus had described. The opening was narrow and dark, and I felt a mixture of excitement and apprehension as we prepared to enter. The cave was unlike anything I had ever seen. The walls were covered in strange, bioluminescent algae that cast an eerie glow, illuminating our path. As we ventured deeper, the cave widened into a large, subterranean chamber. The water was surprisingly clear, and I could see ancient rock formations and peculiar marine life. Suddenly, Yuan tapped my shoulder and pointed ahead. My heart skipped a beat as I saw a large, shadowy figure moving gracefully through the water. It was unlike any creature I had ever encountered, with a long neck, a serpentine body, and flippers that propelled it effortlessly through the cave. Nessie. I quickly turned on my underwater camera and began filming, capturing the creature's movements. Nessie seemed to be curious about us, approaching slowly, and then retreating. She was majestic and serene, a living relic from a time long past. I felt a profound sense of awe and wonder as I watched her glide through the water. After what felt like an eternity, Nessie disappeared into the depths of the cave. Yuan and I surfaced, our minds reeling with what we had just witnessed. We returned to the boat and reviewed the footage, our excitement growing with each passing moment. We had captured undeniable proof of the Loch Ness Monster. The next few days were a whirlwind of activity. We shared our findings with the local community and the scientific world, sparking a media frenzy. Experts from around the globe descended upon Loch Ness, eager to study the creature and the unique ecosystem of the underwater caves. As the days turned into weeks, we learned more about Nessie and her habitat. The caves provided a safe haven, with a stable food supply and protection from the outside world. Nessie was not alone. We discovered a small population of similar creatures, suggesting a breeding colony that had managed to survive undetected for centuries. The discovery of Nessie and the underwater caves had a profound impact on our understanding of marine biology and evolutionary history. It challenged our perceptions of what was possible and opened up new avenues of research. For the village of Drumnadrakit, it brought a sense of pride and wonder, reaffirming the magic and mystery of Loch Ness. For me, the experience was transformative. I had come full circle, returning to the place where my fascination with the natural world had begun. The journey had reignited my passion for exploration and discovery, and I felt a deep connection to my heritage and the landscape that had shaped my life. As I stood on the shores of Loch Ness, looking out over the water, I felt a sense of peace and fulfillment. Nessie was real, and the loch still held many secrets waiting to be uncovered. I knew that my work was far from over, and I was eager to continue exploring the mysteries of the deep. The legend of the Loch Ness Monster had become a reality, and the world would never be the same. But for the people of Drumnadrakit, Nessie was more than just a creature. She was a symbol of the unknown, a reminder that there are still wonders to be discovered and mysteries to be solved. As I prepared to leave the village and return to my life as a marine biologist, I felt a renewed sense of purpose. The story of Nessie was far from over, and I was determined to continue uncovering the secrets of the natural world, one discovery at a time. My name is Elijah Blackwood, and I'm a historian with a focus on Native American folklore. My fascination with these ancient tales began in childhood when my grandfather, a member of the Ojibwe tribe, would tell me stories passed down through generations. Among these stories, the legend of the Wendigo stood out the most, a monstrous spirit born from human greed and the hunger for flesh. Little did I know, this legend would become a terrifying reality for me. In the fall of 2022, I received a grant to conduct field research in the remote forests of northern Minnesota. My goal was to document and understand the cultural significance of the Wendigo myth among the Ojibwe and neighboring tribes. I set up my base in a small cabin near the edge of the forest, far from the nearest town. The isolation was perfect for my research, but it also carried an unsettling quiet that gnawed at my nerves. The first few weeks were productive. I interviewed local tribal elders, who shared their knowledge and personal encounters with the Wendigo. According to the legend, the Wendigo was once a human who had committed the ultimate taboo of cannibalism, transforming into a gaunt, skeletal creature, driven by an insatiable hunger for human flesh. Its presence was heralded by the stench of decay and an eerie, bone-chilling cold. One elder, Martha Whitefeather, was particularly insightful. She spoke of a series of disappearances in the area during her youth, which many attributed to the Wendigo. "It feeds on fear and desperation," she said, her voice trembling. "And when the cold winds blow, it awakens." As winter approached, the temperature dropped significantly, and a sense of foreboding settled over the forest. The nights were long and filled with the howling of the wind, which seemed to carry whispers of something sinister. My nights were restless, plagued by vivid nightmares of being hunted by a shadowy figure. One evening, as I was reviewing my notes by the fireplace, I heard a strange noise outside the cabin. It was a low, guttural growl, unlike any animal I had ever encountered. I grabbed my flashlight and cautiously stepped outside, scanning the dark forest. The beam of light caught a pair of glowing eyes in the distance, and my heart skipped a beat. The eyes disappeared, and I heard the sound of something large moving through the trees. I retreated to the safety of the cabin, bolting the door behind me. My mind raced with the possibility that the Wendigo was not just a myth, but a real and terrifying presence in the forest. The next day, I decided to explore the area where I had seen the eyes. I found large, claw-like footprints in the snow, leading deeper into the forest. As I followed the trail, the air grew colder, and an unnatural stillness enveloped the woods. The silence was broken only by the crunch of my footsteps and the distant cawing of crows. I came across a clearing where the trees were twisted and blackened as if scorched by fire. The ground was littered with bones, both animal and human, picked clean and gnawed to the marrow. My stomach churned at the sight, and I felt a primal fear take hold of me. Suddenly, a gust of icy wind swept through the clearing, and I heard a whispering voice calling my name. I turned around, and there it was, Wendigo. Its gaunt, skeletal frame towered over me, its eyes burning with a malevolent hunger. The creature's breath was visible in the frigid air, and its foul stench filled my nostrils. I froze in terror, my mind unable to process what I was seeing. The Wendigo let out a blood-curdling scream and lunged at me. I stumbled backward, narrowly avoiding its grasp, and ran for my life. The forest seemed to close in around me, the twisted trees forming a labyrinth of shadows. I reached the cabin and slammed the door shut, my heart pounding in my chest. I knew I couldn't stay here. The Wendigo would find a way in eventually. I gathered my essentials and prepared to leave, but the sound of scratching at the door filled me with dread. The creature was relentless, and I could hear its growls growing louder. Desperate, I remembered a story Martha had told me about the only way to repel a Wendigo. According to legend, the creature feared fire and could be driven away by its light. I grabbed a can of gasoline from the storage shed and doused the perimeter of the cabin, setting it ablaze. The flames roared to life, casting eerie shadows on the trees. The Wendigo let out a furious howl and retreated into the darkness. I watched as the fire consumed the cabin, feeling a mix of relief and sorrow. My research was gone, but my life was spared. I made my way back to the nearest town, my mind reeling from the encounter. The legend of the Wendigo was no longer just a story, but a horrifying reality. I shared my experience with the tribal elders, who confirmed that I had encountered the true essence of the Wendigo. The experience changed me. I realized that some legends are grounded in truths we cannot fully comprehend. The Wendigo was a manifestation of human darkness, a reminder of the consequences of our actions and the depths of our primal fears. As I returned to my academic life, I carried with me the lessons of the Wendigo. I continued to study and document folklore, but with a newfound respect for the power of these ancient stories. They were not just tales, but warnings and reflections of our own humanity. The forest of northern Minnesota still holds the memory of that cold, terrifying winter. The Wendigo remains a guardian of its secrets, a creature of the night that reminds us of the thin line between civilization and the wild. And as the cold winds blow, I remember the fear and awe of facing the Wendigo, and the enduring power of our legends. My name is Claire Davenport, and I am a freelance journalist specializing in the unexplained and supernatural. I've always been drawn to the mysteries that exist on the fringes of sociohistories of ghosts, cryptids, and otherworldly phenomena that defy rational explanation. One legend that has long fascinated me is that of the Jersey Devil, a creature said to haunt the Pine Barrens of New Jersey. Over the years, I had heard numerous accounts of sightings and encounters. But it wasn't until the fall of 2023 that I decided to investigate for myself. The legend of the Jersey Devil dates back to the 18th century. According to folklore, the creature was the 13th child of a woman named Deborah Leeds, who cursed it out of frustration. Born as a deformed monster with wings, hooves, and a forked tail, it supposedly flew out of the chimney and disappeared into the Pine Barrens, where it has been seen ever since. I arrived in the small town of Leeds Point, near the heart of the Pine Barrens, with my camera equipment and a sense of eager anticipation. The locals were friendly but guarded, their skepticism about my quest evident. "You won't find anything out there," an old man at the diner warned me. "The Jersey Devil is just a story we tell to scare the kids." Undeterred, I set up camp at a remote spot in the forest. The Pine Barrens were both beautiful and eerie, with dense woods that seemed to swallow the light. As night fell, the forest came alive with the sounds of nocturnal creatures. I felt a mixture of excitement and unease, wondering if I would encounter the legendary beast. The first few nights were uneventful. I spent my days exploring the forest and interviewing locals who claimed to have seen the Jersey Devil. Their stories varied, but a common theme was the creature's blood-curdling scream and its ability to move swiftly through the trees. Despite their differing accounts, they all spoke with a conviction that sent shivers down my spine. One evening, as I was reviewing my notes by the campfire, I heard a distant scream. It was unlike anything I had ever heard, a high-pitched, almost human wail that echoed through the trees. My heart raced as I grabbed my camera and flashlight, heading in the direction of the sound. The forest was dark and foreboding, flashlight casting long, wavering shadows. I moved cautiously, every rustle and snap of a twig heightening my senses. The scream came again, closer this time, and I felt a surge of adrenaline. I was getting closer. Suddenly, my flashlight beam caught a glimpse of something moving in the underbrush. I stopped, holding my breath. The creature stepped into view, and I felt a wave of fear and awe wash over me. It was tall, with leathery wings and glowing red eyes. Its body was covered in coarse, dark fur, and its face was a grotesque mix of human and animal features. The Jersey Devil. I raised my camera and snapped a few photos, my hands trembling. The creature let out another ear-piercing scream and took to the air, its wings beating the air with incredible force. I watched in stunned silence as it disappeared into the night sky, leaving me alone in the dark, silent forest. I returned to my camp, my mind reeling from what I had just witnessed. Reviewing the photos, I saw that I had captured clear images of the creature. I knew I had to share my findings, but I also understood the gravity of what this meant. The Jersey Devil was real, and its existence would challenge everything we knew about the natural world. The next morning, I packed up my camp and headed back to Leeds Point. I shared my photos and story with the local authorities and the media. The response was overwhelming. Skeptic and believers alike were captivated by the evidence. The town of Leeds Point became the center of a media frenzy, with reporters and researchers flocking to the Pine Barrens in search of the elusive creature. As for me, the encounter with the Jersey Devil changed my life. It validated my passion for the unexplained and solidified my belief that there are still mysteries in this world waiting to be uncovered. I continued my work as a journalist, delving deeper into the realms of the supernatural and unexplained. But the Pine Barrens held a special place in my heart. I returned often, drawn by the allure of the unknown and the memory of that fateful night. The forest remained as enigmatic as ever, its dark secrets hidden beneath the canopy of ancient trees. The legend of the Jersey Devil endured, a testament to the power of folklore and the human imagination. Whether it was a product of fear, misunderstood creature, or something beyond our comprehension, the Jersey Devil remains a symbol of the mysteries that still linger in the shadows of our world. And as I continue my journey into the unknown, I hold onto the belief that some legends are more than just stories, they are windows into the deeper truths that lie just beyond our understanding. My name is Marco Reyes, and I am a veterinarian living in a small town in Puerto Rico. I've always loved animals and dedicated my life to their care and well-being. However, nothing could have prepared me for the horrifying events that transpired in the summer of 2022. Events that brought me face to face with a creature I once thought to be pure myth, the chupacabra. It all started with a series of mysterious livestock deaths in the surrounding rural areas. Farmers were finding their goats, chickens, and even cows dead in the morning, their bodies drained of blood with 2 puncture wounds on their necks. The local media began to stir up panic, referring to the legend of the chupacabra, a creature said to suck the blood of livestock. I was skeptical, of course. As a man of science, I attributed these deaths to more plausible explanations, perhaps a rabid animal or a series of cruel pranks. Nevertheless, the townspeople were frightened, and the local authorities were desperate for answers. That's when they turned to me, hoping that my expertise could shed some light on the situation. I began my investigation by examining the dead animals. The puncture wounds were unlike any I had seen before, too clean and precise for a typical predator. The bodies were completely exsanguinated, as if something had siphoned the blood directly. My curiosity was piqued, and I decided to set up surveillance cameras around several farms to catch the culprit in action. For several nights, I stayed up late, reviewing the footage. Most nights were uneventful, showing only the usual nocturnal activity of the countryside. But on the 5th night, I captured something that sent chills down my spine. The grainy footage showed a small, hunched figure creeping into the pen of a local farmer's goats. The creature moved with an unnatural grace, its eyes glowing in the infrared light of the camera. It approached one of the goats and, with terrifying speed, latched onto its neck, draining it of blood in seconds. I couldn't believe what I was seeing. The creature matched the descriptions I had heard of the chupacabra, hairless, with spines running down its back. It was both fascinating and horrifying. Determined to get to the bottom of this, I decided to track the creature to its lair. Equipped with tranquilizer darts and a strong resolve, I ventured into the dense forest near the farms. The forest was thick and oppressive, filled with the sounds of nocturnal wildlife. The further I went, the more the atmosphere seemed to change, as if the forest itself was warning me to turn back. But I pressed on, guided by a mix of scientific curiosity and a desire to protect my community. After hours of trekking through the underbrush, I stumbled upon a cave entrance hidden behind a thicket. The ground around the cave was littered with bones, both animal and human. My heart pounded in my chest as I realized I had found the chupacabra's lair. Taking a deep breath, I entered the cave, my flashlight cutting through the darkness. The air was thick with the stench of decay, and the walls were covered in strange, ancient markings. As I ventured deeper, I heard the unmistakable sound of movement claws scraping against stone. The chupacabra emerged from the shadows, its eyes gleaming with a predatory intelligence. It was smaller than I had imagined, but its presence was overwhelming. I raised my tranquilizer gun, aiming for the creature. It hissed, baring its fangs, and lunged at me. I fired a dart, hitting the chupacabra in the shoulder. It stumbled, then collapsed, its body twitching as the tranquilizer took effect. I cautiously approached the creature, my hands shaking. Up close, it looked even more otherworldly, its skin covered in scales and its teeth razor sharp. With the chupacabra subdued, I took the opportunity to document the creature, taking photographs and samples. This was a discovery that could change everything we knew about cryptids and the natural world. I carefully transported the chupacabra back to my clinic, where I secured it in a reinforced enclosure. Over the next few days, I studied the chupacabra, learning more about its physiology and behavior. It was an extraordinary creature, unlike anything I had ever encountered. I shared my findings with a select group of colleagues, who were equally astounded. The implications of this discovery were profound, raising questions about the existence of other cryptids and the boundaries of science. As news of my capture spread, the town's fear turned to curiosity and wonder. The chupacabra became a symbol of our small town, attracting researchers and enthusiasts from around the world. I ensured that the creature was treated humanely, continuing my studies while maintaining the highest ethical standards. The experience changed me. It reaffirmed my belief in the mysteries that still exist in our world, and the importance of approaching the unknown with both skepticism and an open mind. The legend of the chupacabra was no longer just a story, it was a reality that I had confronted and survived. In the years that followed, I continued my work as a veterinarian. But my encounter with the chupacabra remained a defining moment in my life. It reminded me that the world is full of wonders waiting to be discovered, and that sometimes, the truth can be stranger than fiction. The chupacabra is now a part of our community's history, a reminder of the thin line between myth and reality. And as I look back on that summer, I feel a sense of pride and awe at having faced the unknown and uncovered one of the greatest mysteries of our time.